I was thinking about how it seems that in relationships, romantic relationships in particular, there is this ongoing desire to figure out what is fair to yourself and what is fair to the other person. And that can be what conflicts are about as well. And these can be deeply challenging. And so if you weren't bonded with somebody, you're not going to go through such a struggle if you didn't feel a sense of connection. That's why, in part, these kinds of struggles don't occur so much in friendships usually. Sometimes they can. But usually it's in the kind of intimate relationship, committed connection, that you see these kinds of dynamics come out. And I believe these are related to the kind of parent-child dynamic. That's why it's not a coincidence that people use the nickname baby for each other. Hey baby. It's like that's where it comes from. It's the child-parent bond being replayed and reacted out and unconsciously, at least, trying to be healed. When we are first born and for years afterwards, we can't really function in the world too well, so we learn dependence. And so what we are trying to learn through relationships, in part, one of the things that we're learning is about balance between connectedness and individuality. So what is fair and what is not fair? Everybody has different ideas about these, and a lot of times these ideas are related to family and our past and our culture and socialization and all these different influences. So, you know, if we were all clones with that would be kind of strange in a dating scenario, but if psychologically we all had the same precepts and same ideas about what is fair, then that would be easy. But life has a certain kind of friction to it that we have to figure out, and that friction comes from differences and learning how to live with differences and work through differences. So one of the ideas that has become helpful for me is this idea about what is assertive behavior. I used to think that assertive was closer to aggressive than it was to passive. That if you're assertive, then you're a little bit more on the aggressive side than the passive side. But then I realized it's not about that. I heard a definition years ago that said, if you are an aggressive person, that means that you respect your rights, but not the other person's rights. If you're a passive person, that means you respect the other person, but not yourself. If you're assertive, you respect the rights of the other person and your own rights as well. And assertive behavior is what a lot of times the core of what we're learning in relationships is. How can we accept something in a way that is fair and doesn't impede upon another person's free will beyond the point that you're comfortable with? And if you're not comfortable with it, are you in need of working on something that is triggering for you? A lot of times what people are working on is control issues, and at the same time they're working on their insecurities. And if we didn't have any connection to another person, there would be no attachment whatsoever to what they did or what they didn't do. But a lot of times what we're working through on an emotional, psychological, and biological level is the fact that because we're attached, we need to be realistic about where we're at with our comfort level in terms of the other person's behaviors. A lot of times there is a dynamic in which one person's messy, one person's clean, one person needs alone time, the other person needs together time. These are all kind of fractals of the underlying lessons that we're learning in life about balance and how to work with dichotomies. And it could be in one relationship you are the needy one, and the next one you are the aloof one. It's about not so much who you are sometimes as much as it is about a role, about what's being played out. Was there a dynamic in your parents in which one person was always doing their own thing and the other person felt uncomfortable being alone, or whatever, you know? These kinds of things get played out because we're trying to figure out what were the forces around us in the past that led to us not feeling completely safe, loved, and connected with others. And so through relationships, we're trying to figure out what is real and what is beneath any insecurities that we may have. So there's never going to be one right way or wrong way to handle every situation that comes up, because you have to really go into what are the underlying dynamics. But I think the key is vulnerability. If people can get beyond the outer conflicts and the appearance of what is the problem and get to the feelings and express those feelings vulnerably, that means you have to identify your feelings in order to express them. So it could be that your impulse in 9 out of 10 situations is going to say why what the other person is doing is wrong. But that is about taking your fears, your insecurities, whatever's going on inside of you, and putting it on the other person without much consciousness or communication on your part. So if you say, you know, whatever it is going on a more vulnerable level, if you are able to identify and express your fears, that's going to be helpful in leading to greater connection and resolution. Because, you know, people can really be independent and aloof and say, well, that's your problem, you got to work on it. Or if there is a connection, they can recognize where the other person's at and be empathic towards it and understand where they're at and be willing to adjust behavior. But a lot of times people get so caught up into pointing out what is wrong with what the other person is doing, they're not going to receive vulnerability from that person because they're putting them in a defensive situation, a defensive position. So if we express our own vulnerability about what's going on a deeper level, that gives space for the other person to do the same about what their fears and insecurities are. And this is all stuff that goes on after the honeymoon period. It's kind of like on a soul level, we bond, and everything in many situations can feel great at first because there is that rush, that chemical, emotional rush of bonding. But then we get right, you know, wherever we are at as an individual, we get back to that place in a couple, or where we were in our last relationship, or whatever lingers from our childhood. It's going to come up again. This is the way things work, because there is a certain kind of movement on a soul level and the level of spiritual growth that is utilizing relationships, utilizing attraction, utilizing a bond for the purpose of growth, so that people can figure out what lingers on within them that feels uncomfortable and is in need of emotional healing. So if you can be assertive, where you respect yourself and you respect the other person, and you can be vulnerable, that will go a long way towards creating greater consciousness in relationships.